If you do not mind, then appreciate my efforts by subscribing to my channel. Thank you very much in advance.
Welcome to Special News YouTube channel. The glorious Ukrainian army continues its legendary victories over the Russian army. The struggle of the Ukrainian army against the Russian invaders is full of great victories that will go down in history. The Ukrainians showed an unprecedented example of resistance when the Russian army invaded their country in February. The Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian army as a whole put up a wall against the attacks of the Russian army. The dreams of the Russian army in Ukraine were soon dashed. The Russian army faced unexpected resistance in Ukraine. The Russian invaders are about to lose many of the territories they won at the very beginning of the war. Ukrainian fighters blockaded the Russian army along the entire battle line. The Russian army is trapped in Ukraine. The successful attacks of the Ukrainian heroic soldiers on the Russian fronts caused incurable wounds in the Russian army. Russia has lost at least 80,000 soldiers in Ukraine since the beginning of the invasion. Russian casualties in Ukraine were not limited to military personnel. The Russian army, in the defeat of the Ukrainian warriors, consumed almost all of its weapons stocks. Russia is struggling to supply weapons to its dying army in Ukraine. The vast majority of the attacks carried out by the Ukrainian army for months involve logistics routes to the Russian front. Russia faced great difficulties due to the damage of many of its logistics networks in Ukraine. Russian soldiers have been unable to meet their needs such as food and shelter, which are necessary for their survival in Ukraine in recent days. Russia's hands are tied in Ukraine. The sanctions imposed on Russia are another factor affecting the aid to be sent to the Russian front. Through sanctions and aid provided to the Ukrainian military, Ukraine's allies are teaching Russia an unforgettable lesson. The Ukrainian army, on the other hand, continues to intensify its attacks day by day, taking advantage of the weakening of the Russian army, and it's coming to the brink of collapse. Ukraine's Kherson acquisition is extremely important in reaching other important cities of the region. The Ukrainian army announced Crimea as its next target. Winning Crimea, which Russia annexed in 2014, is Zelensky's biggest dream. The Ukrainian army continues its attacks without interruption to clear the Crimea from Russian invaders, which is Zelensky's and the Ukrainians' big dream. The attack of the Ukrainian army on Sevastopol caused great disappointment in Russia. With its flawless plan, the Ukrainian army bombed the Russian Navy's port in Sevastopol, Crimea, with 7 submarine drones and 9 UAVs. The main headquarters of the Russian Black Sea Fleet was helpless. In the face of the Ukrainian drone army attack, Ukraine's drones easily penetrated the Russian defenses. Ukrainian underwater drones were the size of a canoe, racing through the waves, gliding towards their intended destination. It was reported that 3 warships belonging to the Russian Navy were damaged when the Ukrainian UAVs hit their targets. The most important of these was the Admiral Makarov, the flagship of the Russian Navy. Another ship and minesweeper were also hit. As a result of this attack, the damage was less than expected, the warheads barely scratching their victims. But the effects of the attack by Ukrainian UAVs on the Russian Navy in Sevastopol went far beyond the explosions. They put the Russian Navy into protection mode and essentially locked them in the port. The Ukrainian army's attack on Sevastopol had a dramatic effect on the morale and sense of security of the Russian Navy, which Putin trusted so much. Russia quickly added new defenses to the Russian Navy, and new procedures were introduced. Russia's most powerful warships in the war are now mostly moored in port. Ukraine's Sevastopol attack, which caused an earthquake in Russia, took its place in the dusty pages of history. It wasn't the first time the Ukrainian military had used explosive-laden USVs to attack ships in combat, but it is the clearest and cleanest example to date. And the naval drones included are closer to modern technologies. These drones used modern communication systems, probably Starlink, and collective tactics. The number and degree of coordination involved were below swarm tactics, but halfway through, so it could be a preview of the upcoming battles. The drones used by the Ukrainian military in the attack are small and relatively inexpensive. Despite using the latest technology, they were the kind of thing that could be installed in almost any garage. Drones stand out in terms of ease of use. Ready-to-use civilian components such as jet skis can be used in drone attacks. This feature of drones means that the risk of use is very low,